Dorothy and the Wizard in Oz by L. Frank Baum. Dedicated to Harriet A. B. Neal. Chapter 11. They Meet the Wooden Gargoyles. Another breathless climb brought our adventurers to a third landing, where there was a rift in the mountain. On peering out, all they could see was rolling banks of clouds so thick that they obscured all else. But the travellers were obliged to rest, and while they were sitting on the rocky floor, the wizard felt in his pocket and brought out the 9 tiny piglets. To his delight, they were now plainly visible, which proved that they had passed beyond the influence of the magical valley of ʟᴏᴏ.
"Hi, we can see each other again,"
cried one joyfully.
"Yes," sighed Eureka, "and I also can see you again, and the sight makes me dreadfully hungry. Please, Mr. Wizard, may I eat just one of the fat little piglets? You'd never miss one of them, I'm sure."
"What a horrid, savage beast!" exclaimed a piglet. "And after we've been such good friends too, and played with one another."
"When I'm not hungry, I love to play with you all," said the kitten demurely. "But when my stomach is empty, it seems that nothing would fill it so nicely as a fat piglet."
"And we trusted you so," said another of the 9 reproachfully. "And thought you were respectable," said another. "It seems we were mistaken," declared a third, looking at the kitten timorously. "No one with such murderous desires should belong to our party, I'm sure."
"You see, Eureka," remarked Dorothy reprovingly, "you are making yourself disliked. There are certain things proper for a kitten to eat, but I never heard of a kitten eating a pig under any circumstances."
"Did you ever see such little pigs before?" asked the kitten. "They are no bigger than mice, and I'm sure mice are proper for me to eat."
"It isn't the bigness, dear, it's a variety," replied the girl. "These are Mr. Wizard's pets, just as you are my pet, and it wouldn't be any more proper for you to eat them than it would be for Jim to eat you."
"That's just what I shall do if you don't let those little balls of pork alone," said Jim, glaring at the kitten with his round, big eyes. "If you injure any one of them, I'll chew you up instantly."
The kitten looked at the horse thoughtfully, as if trying to decide whether he meant it or not. "In that case," she said, "I'll leave them alone. You haven't many teeth left, Jim, but the few you have are sharp enough to make me shudder. So the piglets will be perfectly safe hereafter, as far as I am concerned."
"That's right, Eureka," remarked the wizard earnestly. "Let us all be a happy family and love one another."
Eureka yawned and stretched herself. "I've always loved the piglets," she said, "but they don't love me." "No one can love a person he's afraid of," asserted Dorothy. "If you behave and don't scare the little pigs, I'm sure they'll grow very fond of you." The wizard now put the 9 tiny ones back into his pocket, and the journey was resumed.
"We must be pretty near the top now," said the boy as they climbed warily up the dark, winding stairway.
"The country of the Gurgles can't be far from the top of the earth," remarked Dorothy. "It isn't very nice down here. I'd like to get home again, I'm sure." No one replied to this, because they found they needed all their breath for the climb. The stairs had become narrower, and Zeb and the wizard often had to help Jim pull the buggy from one step to another, or keep it from jamming against the rocky walls. At last, however, a dim light appeared ahead of them, which grew clearer and stronger as they advanced.
"Thank goodness we're nearly there," panted the little wizard.
Jim, who was in advance, saw the last stair before him and stuck his head up of the rocky sides of the stairway. Then he halted, ducked down, and began to back up, so that he nearly fell with the buggy onto the others.
"Let's go down again,"
he said in his hoarse voice.
"Nonsense," snapped the tired wizard. "What's the matter with you, old man?"
"Everything," grumbled the horse. "I've taken a look at this place, and it's no fit country for real creatures to go to. Everything's dead up there. No flesh or blood or growing thing anywhere."
"Never mind, we can't turn back," said Dorothy, "and we don't intend to stay there anyhow."
"It's dangerous," growled Jim in a stubborn tone. "See here, my good steed," broke in the wizard. "Little Dorothy and I have been in many queer countries in our travels, and always escaped without harm. We've even been to the marvelous land of Oz, haven't we, Dorothy? So we don't much care what the country of the gargoyles is like. Go ahead, Jim, and whatever happens, we'll make the best of it." "All right," answered the horse. "This is your excursion and not mine. So if you get into trouble, don't blame me."
With this speech, he bent forward and dragged the buggy up the remaining steps. The others followed, and soon they were all standing upon a broad platform and gazing at the most curious and startling sight their eyes had ever beheld.
"The country of the gargoyles is all wooden," exclaimed Zeb. And so it was. The ground was sawdust, and the pebbles scattered around were hard knots from trees, worn smooth in course of time. There were odd wooden houses with carved wooden flowers in the front yards. The tree trunks were of coarse wood, but the leaves of the trees were shavings. The patches of grass were splinters of wood, and where neither grass nor sawdust showed with a solid wooden flooring. Wooden birds fluttered among the trees, and wooden cows were browsing upon the wooden grass. But the most amazing things of all were the wooden people, the creatures known as gargoyles. These were very numerous, for the place was thickly inhabited, and a large group of the queer people clustered near, gazing sharply upon the strangers who had emerged from the long spiral stairway. The gargoyles were very small of stature, being less than 3 feet in height. Their bodies were round, their legs short and thick, and their arms extraordinarily long and stout. Their heads were too big for their bodies, and their faces were decidedly ugly to look upon. Some had long curved noses and chins, small eyes and wide grinning mouths. Others had flat noses, protruding eyes, and ears that were shaped like those of an elephant. There were many types indeed, scarcely 2 being alike, but all were equally disagreeable in appearance. The tops of their heads had no hair, but were carved into a variety of fantastic shapes, some having a row of points or balls around the top, others designs resembling flowers or vegetables, and still others having squares that looked like waffle-cut crisscrosses on their heads. They all wore short wooden wings, which were fastened to their wooden bodies by means of wooden hinges with wooden screws, and with these wings they flew swiftly and noiselessly here and there, their legs being of little use to them. This noiseless motion was one of the most peculiar things about the gargoyles. They made no sound at all, either in flying or trying to speak, and they conversed mainly by means of quick signals made with their wooden fingers or lips. Neither was there any sound to be heard anywhere throughout the wooden country. The birds did not sing, nor did the cows moo. Yet there was more than ordinary activity everywhere.
The group of these queer creatures which was discovered, clustered near the stairs at first, remained staring and motionless, glaring with evil eyes at the intruders who had so suddenly appeared in their land. In turn, the wizard and the children, the horse and the kitten, examined the gargoyles with the same silent attention.
"There's going to be trouble, I'm sure," remarked the horse. "Unhitch those tugs, Zeb, and set me free from the buggy so I can fight comfortably."
"Jim's right," sighed the wizard. "There's going to be trouble, and my sword isn't stout enough to cut up those wooden bodies, so I shall have to get out my revolvers."
He got his satchel from the buggy and, opening it, took out 2 deadly-looking revolvers that made the children shrink back in alarm just to look at. "What harm can the gurgles do?" asked Dorothy. "They have no weapons to hurt us with."
"Each of their arms is a wooden club," answered the little man, "but I'm sure the creatures mean mischief by the looks of their eyes. Even these revolvers can merely succeed in damaging a few of their wooden bodies, and after that we will be at their mercy."
"But why fight at all in that case?" asked the girl.
"So I may die with a clear conscience," returned the wizard gravely. "It's every man's duty to do the best he knows how, and I'm going to do it."
"Wish I had an axe," said Zeb, who by now had unhitched the horse.
"If we had known we were coming, we might have brought along several other useful things," responded the wizard. "But we dropped into this adventure rather unexpectedly."
The gargoyles had backed away a distance when they heard the sound of talking, for although our friends had spoken in low tones, their words seemed loud in the silence surrounding them. But as soon as the conversation ceased, the grinning, ugly creatures arose in a flock and flew swiftly toward the strangers, their long arms stretched out before them like the bowsprits of a fleet of sailboats. The horse had especially attracted their notice because it was the biggest and strangest creature they had ever seen. So it became the center of their first attack. But Jim was ready for them, and when he saw them coming, he turned his heel towards them and began kicking out as hard as he could. Crack, crash, bang, went his iron-shod hooves against the wooden bodies of the gargoyles, and they were battered right and left with such force that they scattered like straws in the wind. But the noise and clatter seemed as dreadful to them as Jim's heels, for all who were able swiftly turned and flew away to a great distance. The others picked themselves up from the ground one by one and quickly rejoined their fellows, so for a moment the horse thought he had won the fight with ease. But the wizard was not so confident.
"Those wooden things are impossible to hurt," he said. "That all the damage Jim has done to them is to knock a few splinters from their noses and ears. That cannot make them look any uglier, I'm sure, and it is my opinion they will soon renew the attack."
"What made them fly away?" asked Dorothy.
"The noise, of course. Don't you remember how the champion escaped them by shouting his battle cry?"
"Suppose we escape down the stairs too," suggested the boy. "We have time just now, and I'd rather face the invisible bears than those wooden imps."
"No," returned Dorothy stoutly. "It won't do to go back, for then we would never get home. Let's fight it out."
"That is what I advise," said the wizard. "They haven't defeated us yet, and Jim is worth a whole army."
But the gargoyles were clever enough not to attack the horse the next time. They advanced in a great swarm, having been joined by many more of their kind, and they flew straight over Jim's head to where the others were standing. The wizard raised one of his revolvers and fired into the throng of his enemies, and the shot resounded like a clap of thunder in that silent place. Some of the wooden beings fell flat upon the ground, where they quivered and trembled in every limb, but most of them managed to wheel and escape again to a distance.
Zeb ran and picked up one of the gargoyles that lay nearest to him.
The top of its head was carved into a crown, and the wizard's bullet had struck it exactly in the left eye, which was a hard wooden knot. Half of the bullet stuck in the wood and half stuck out, so it had been the jar and the sudden noise that had knocked the creature down more than the fact that it was really hurt. Before this crowned gargoyle had recovered himself, Zeb had wound a strap several times around its body, confining its wings and arms so that it could not move. Then, having tied the wooden creature securely, the boy buckled the strap and tossed his prisoner into the buggy. By that time, the others had all retired. Chapter 12. A Wonderful Escape. For a while, the enemy hesitated to renew the attack. Then a few of them advanced until another shot from the wizard's revolver made them retreat.
"That's fine," said Zeb. "We got 'em on the run now, sure enough." "But only for a time," replied the wizard, shaking his head gloomily. "These revolvers are good for 6 shots each, but when those are gone, we shall be helpless."
The gargoyles seemed to realize this, for they sent a few of their band time after time to attack the strangers and draw the fire from the little man's revolvers. In this way, none of them was shocked by the dreadful report more than once, for the main band kept far away, and each time a new company was sent into the battle. When the wizard had fired all of his 12 bullets, he had caused no damage to the enemy, except to stun a few by the noise, and so be as no nearer to victory than in the beginning of the fray.
"What shall we do now?" asked Dorothy anxiously.
"Let's yell, all together," said Zeb. "And fight at the same time," added the wizard. "We will get near Jim so that he can help us, and each one must take some weapon and do the best he can. I'll use my sword, although it isn't much account in this affair. Dorothy must take her parasol and open it suddenly when the wooden folks attack her. I haven't anything for you, Zeb." "I'll use the king," said the boy, and pulled his prisoner out of the buggy. The bound gargoyle's arms extended far out beyond its head, so by grasping its wrists, Zeb found the king made a very good club. The boy was strong for one of his years, having always worked upon a farm, so he was likely to prove more dangerous to the enemy than the wizard. When the next company of gargoyles advanced, our adventurers began yelling as if they had gone mad. Even the kitten gave a dreadfully shrill scream, and at the same time, Jim the cab horse neighed loudly. This daunted the enemy for a time, but the defenders were soon out of breath. Perceiving this, as well as the fact that there were no more of the awful bangs to come from the revolvers, the gargoyles advanced in a swarm as thick as bees, so that the air was filled with them. Dorothy squatted upon the ground and put up a parasol, which nearly covered her and proved a great protection. The wizard's sword blade snapped into a dozen pieces at the first blow he struck against the wooden people. Zeb pounded away with the gargoyle he was using as a club until he had knocked down dozens of foes, but at last they clustered so thickly about him that he no longer had room in which to swing his arms. The horse performed some wonderful kicking, and even ʟɪᴏᴏ assisted when she leaped bodily upon the gargoyles and scratched and bit at them like a wildcat. But all this bravery amounted to nothing at all. The wooden things wound their long arms around Zeb and the wizard and held them fast. Dorothy was captured in the same way, and numbers of the gargoyles clung to Jim's legs, so weighting him down that the poor beast was helpless. ʟɪᴏᴏ made a desperate dash to escape and scampered along the ground like a streak, but a grinning gargoyle flew after her and grabbed her before she had gone very far.
All of them expected nothing less than instant death. But to their surprise, the wooden creatures flew into the air with them and bore them far away, over miles and miles of wooden country, until they came to a wooden city. The houses of this city had many corners, being square and 6-sided and 8-sided. They were tower-like in shape, and the best of them seemed old and weather-worn, yet all were strong and substantial. To one of these houses, which had neither doors nor windows, but only one broad opening far up underneath the roof, the prisoners were brought by their captors. The gargoyles roughly pushed them into the opening, where there was a platform, and then flew away and left them. As they had no wings, the strangers could not fly away, and if they jumped down from such a height, they would surely be killed. The creatures had sense enough to reason that way, and the only mistake they made was in supposing the Earth people were unable to overcome such ordinary difficulties. Jim was brought with the others, although it took a good many gargoyles to carry the big beast through the air and land him on the high platform, and the buggy was thrust in after him because it belonged to the party, and the wooden folks had no idea what it was used for or whether it was alive or not. When Eureka's captor had thrown the kitten after the others, the last gargoyle silently disappeared, leaving our friends to breathe freely once more.
What an awful fight, said Dorothy, catching her breath in little gasps. Oh, I don't know, purred Eureka, smoothing her ruffled fur with her paw. We didn't manage to hurt anybody, and nobody managed to hurt us. Thank goodness we are together again, even if we are prisoners, sighed the little girl.
I wonder why they didn't kill us on the spot, remarked Zeb, who had lost his king in the struggle. They are probably keeping us for some ceremony, the wizard answered reflectively. But there is no doubt they intend to kill us as dead as possible in a short time.
As dead as possible would be pretty dead, wouldn't it? Asked Dorothy.
Yes, my dear, but we have no need to worry about that just now. Let us examine our prison and see what it is like.
The space underneath the roof where they stood permitted them to see on all sides of the tall building, and they looked with much curiosity at the city spread out beneath them. Everything visible was made of wood, and the seams seemed stiff and extremely unnatural. From their platform, a stair descended into the house, and the children and the wizard explored it after lighting a lantern to show them the way. Several stories of empty rooms rewarded their search, but nothing more. So after a time, they came back to the platform again. Had there been any doors or windows in the lower rooms, or had not the boards of the house been so thick and stout, escape could have been easy. But to remain down below was like being in a cellar or the hold of a ship, and they did not like the darkness or the damp smell. In this country, as in all others they had visited underneath the earth's surface, there was no night, a constant and strong light coming from some unknown source. Looking out, they could see into some of the houses near them, where there were open windows in abundance, and were able to mark the forms of the wooden gargoyles moving about in their dwellings.
This seems to be their time of rest, observed the wizard. All people need rest, even if they are made of wood, and as there is no night here, they select a certain time of the day in which to sleep or doze. I feel sleepy myself, remarked Zeb, yawning.
Why, where's Eureka? Cried Dorothy suddenly.
They all looked around, but the kitten was no place to be seen.
She's gone out for a walk, said Jem gruffly.
Where? On the roof? Asked the girl.
No, she just dug her claws into the wood and climbed down the sides of this house to the ground.
She couldn't climb down, Jim, said Dorothy. To climb means to go up.
Who said so? Demanded the horse.
My school teacher said so, and she knows a lot, Jim.
To climb down is sometimes used as a figure of speech, remarked the wizard. Well, this was a figure of a cat, said Jem, and she went down anyhow, whether she climbed or crept.
Dear me, how careless ʔɪṛδs is, exclaimed the girl, much distressed. The gurgles will get her sure.
Chuckled the cab horse. They're not gurgles, little maid, they're gargoyles.
Never mind, they'll get Eureka, whatever they're called. No, they won't, said the voice of the kitten, and Eureka herself crawled over the edge of the platform and sat down quietly upon the floor. Wherever have you been, Eureka? Asked Dorothy sternly. Watching the wooden folks. They're too funny for anything, Dorothy. Just now they are all going to bed, and what do you think? They unhook the hinges of their wings and put them in a corner until they wake up again. What? The hinges? No, the wings.
That, said Zeb, explains why this house is used by them for a prison. If any of the gargoyles act badly and have to be put in jail, they're brought here and their wings unhooked and taken away from them until they promise to be good.
The wizard had listened intently to what Eureka had said.
I wish we had some of those loose wings, he said.
Could we fly with them? Asked Dorothy.
I think so. If the gargoyles can unhook the wings, then the power to fly lies in the wings themselves and not in the wooden bodies of the people who wear them. So if we had the wings, we could probably fly as well as they do, at least while we are in their country and under the spell of its magic.
But how would it help us to be able to fly? Questioned the girl.
Come here, said the little man, and took her to one of the corners of the building. Do you see that big rock standing on the hillside yonder? He continued, pointing with his finger.
Yes, it's a good way off, but I can see it, she replied.
Well, inside that rock, which reaches up into the clouds, is an archway, very much like the one we entered when we climbed the spiral stairway from the Valley of ʔɪṛδs. I'll get my spyglass, and then you can see it more plainly.
He fetched a small but powerful telescope, which had been in his satchel, and by its aid the little girl clearly saw the opening. Where does it lead to? She asked.
That I cannot tell, said the wizard, but we cannot now be far below the earth's surface. That entrance may lead to another stairway that will bring us on top of our world again where we belong. So, if we had the wings and could escape the gargoyles, we might fly to that rock and be saved. I'll get you the wings, said Zeb, who had thoughtfully listened to all this. That is, if the kitten will show me where they are.
But how can you get down? Inquired the girl wonderingly. For answer, Zeb began to unfasten Jim's harness, strap by strap, and to buckle one piece to another until he had made a long leather strip that would reach to the ground.
I can climb down that all right, he said. No, you can't, remarked Jim with a twinkle in his round eyes. You may go down, but you can only climb up. Well, I'll climb up when I get back then, said the boy with a laugh. Now, Eureka, you'll have to show me the way to those wings.
You must be very quiet, warned the kitten, for if you make the least noise, the gargoyles will wake up. They can hear a pin drop.
I'm not going to drop a pin, said Zeb.
He had fastened one end of the strap to a wheel of the buggy, and now he let the line dangle over the side of the house.
Be careful, cautioned Dorothy earnestly.
I will, said the boy, and let himself slide over the edge.
The girl and the wizard leaned over and watched Zeb work his way carefully downward, hand over hand, until he stood upon the ground below. Eureka clung with her claws to the wooden side of the house and let herself down easily. Then together they crept away to enter the low doorway of a neighboring dwelling. The watchers waited in breathless suspense until the boy again appeared, his arms now full of the wooden wings. When he came to where the strap was hanging, he tied the wings all in a bunch to the end of the line, and the wizard drew them up. Then the line was let down again for Zeb to climb up by. Eureka quickly followed him, and soon they were all standing together upon the platform, with 8 of the much-prized wooden wings beside them. The boy was no longer sleepy, but full of energy and excitement. He put the harness together again and hitched Jim to the buggy. Then, with the wizard's help, he tried to fasten some of the wings to the old cab horse. This was no easy task, because half of each of the hinges of the wings was missing, it being still fastened to the body of the gargoyle who had used it. However, the wizard went once more to his satchel, which seemed to contain a surprising variety of odds and ends, and brought out a spool of strong wire, by means of which they managed to fasten 4 of the wings to Jim's harness, 2 near his head and 2 near his tail. They were a bit wiggly, but secure enough if only the harness held together. The other 4 wings were then fastened to the buggy, 2 on each side, for the buggy must bear the weight of the children and the wizard as it flew through the air. These preparations had not consumed a great deal of time, but the sleeping gargoyles were beginning to wake up and move around, and soon some of them would be hunting for their missing wings. So the prisoners resolved to leave their prison at once. They mounted into the buggy, Dorothy holding Eureka safe in her lap. The girl sat in the middle of the seat, with Zeb and the wizard on each side of her. When all was ready, the boy shook the reins and said, "Fly away, Jim." "Which wings must I flop first?" asked the cab horse undecidedly. "Flop them all together," suggested the wizard. "Some of them are crooked," objected the horse. "Never mind, we'll stare with the wings on the buggy," said Zeb. "Just you light out and make for that rock, Jim, and don't waste any time about it either." So the horse gave a groan, flopped its 4 wings all together, and flew away from the platform. Dorothy was a little anxious about the success of their trip, for the way Jim arched his long neck and spread out his bony legs as he fluttered and floundered through the air was enough to make anybody nervous. He groaned, too, as if frightened, and the wings creaked dreadfully because the wizard had forgotten to oil them. But they kept fairly good time with the wings of the buggy, so that they made excellent progress from the start. The only thing that anyone could complain of with justice was the fact that they wobbled first up and then down, as if the road were rocky instead of being as smooth as the air could make it. The main point, however, was that they flew, and flew swiftly, if a bit unevenly, toward the rock for which they had headed. Some of the gargoyles saw them presently and lost no time in collecting a band to pursue the escaping prisoners, so that when Dorothy happened to look back, she saw them coming in a great cloud that almost darkened the sky. Chapter 13. The Den of the Dragonettes. Our friends had a good start and were able to maintain it, for with their 8 wings they could go just as fast as could the gargoyles. All the way to the great rock the wooden people followed them, and when Jim finally alighted at the mouth of the cavern, the pursuers were still some distance away. "But I'm afraid they'll catch us yet," said Dorothy, greatly excited. "No, we must stop them," declared the wizard. "Quick, Zeb,
help me pull off these wooden wings."
They tore off the wings, for which they had no further use, and the wizard piled them in a heap just outside the entrance to the cavern. Then he poured over them all the kerosene oil that was left in his oil can, and lighting a match, set fire to the pile. The flames leaped up at once, and the bonfire began to smoke and roar and crackle, just as the great army of wooden gargoyles arrived. The creatures drew back at once, being filled with fear and horror, for such a dreadful thing as a fire they had never before known in all the history of their wooden land. Inside the archway were several doors leading to different rooms built into the mountain, and Zeb and the wizard lifted these wooden doors from their hinges and tossed them all onto the flames.
"That will prove a barrier for some time to come," said the little man, smiling pleasantly all over his wrinkled face at the success of the stratagem. "Perhaps the flames will set fire to all that miserable wooden country, and if it does, the loss will be very small, and the gargoyles never will be missed. But come, my children, let us explore the mountain and discover which way we must go in order to escape from this cavern, which is getting to be almost as hot as a bake oven."
To their disappointment, there was within this mountain no regular flight of steps by means of which they could mount to the earth's surface. A sort of inclined tunnel led upward for a way, and they found the floor of it both rough and steep. Then a sudden turn brought them to a narrow gallery where the buggy could not pass. This delayed and bothered them for a while, because they did not wish to leave the buggy behind them. It carried their baggage, and was useful to ride in whenever there were good roads, and since it had accompanied them so far in their travels, they felt it their duty to preserve it. So Zeb and the wizard set to work, and took off the wheels and the top, and then they put the buggy edgewise, so it would take up the smallest space. In this position they managed, with the aid of the patient cab horse, to drag the vehicle through the narrow part of the passage. It was not a great distance, fortunately, and when the path grew broader, they put the buggy together again and proceeded more comfortably. But the road was nothing more than a series of rifts or cracks in the mountain, and it went zigzag in every direction, slanting first up and then down, until they were puzzled as to whether they were any nearer to the top of the earth than when they had first started hours before.
"Anyhow," said Dorothy, "we've escaped those awful gurgles, and that's one comfort."
Probably the gargoyles are still busy trying to put out the fire," returned the wizard. "But even if they succeeded in doing that, it would be very difficult for them to fly amongst these rocks, so I'm sure we need fear them no longer."
Once in a while they would come to a deep crack in the floor, which made the way quite dangerous, but there was still enough oil in the lanterns to give them light, and the cracks were not so wide but they were able to jump over them. Sometimes they had to climb over heaps of loose rock, where Jim could scarcely drag the buggy. At such times, Dorothy, Zeb, and the wizard all pushed behind and lifted the wheels over the roughest places, so they managed, by dint of hard work, to keep going. But the little party was both weary and discouraged, when at last, on turning a sharp corner, the wanderers found themselves in a vast cave, arching high over their heads and having a smooth, level floor. The cave was circular in shape, and all around its edge near to the ground appeared groups of dull yellow lights, 2 of them being always side by side. These were motionless at first, but soon began to flicker more brightly and to sway slowly from side to side, and then up and down.
"What sort of place is this?" asked the boy, trying to see more clearly through the gloom. "I cannot imagine, I'm sure," answered the wizard, also peering about.
Whew, snarled Eureka, arching her back until her hair stood straight on end. It's a den of alligators or crocodiles or some other dreadful creatures. Don't you see their terrible eyes? Eureka sees better in the dark than we can, whispered Dorothy. Tell us, dear, what do the creatures look like? She asked, addressing her pet. I simply can't describe them, answered the kitten, shuddering. Their eyes are like pie plates, and their mouths like coal scuttles. But their bodies don't seem very big. Where are they? Inquired the girl. They are in little pockets all around the edge of this cavern. Oh, Dorothy, you can't imagine what horrid things they are. They're uglier than the gargoyles. Be careful how you criticize your neighbors, spoke a rasping voice nearby. As a matter of fact, you are rather ugly-looking creatures yourselves, and I'm sure Mother has often told us we were the loveliest and prettiest things in all the world. Hearing these words, our friends turned in the direction of the sound, and the wizard held his lanterns so that their light would flood one of the little pockets in the rock. Why, it's a dragon! He exclaimed. No, answered the owner of the big yellow eyes which were blinking at them so steadily. You are wrong about that. We hope to grow to be dragons someday, but just now we're only dragonettes. What's that? Asked Dorothy, gazing fearfully at the great scaly head, the yawning mouth, and the big eyes. Young dragons, of course, but we are not allowed to call ourselves real dragons until we get our full growth, was the reply. The big dragons are very proud and don't think children amount to much. But Mother says that someday we will all be very powerful and important. Where is your mother? Asked the wizard, anxiously looking around. And she has gone up to the top of the earth to hunt for our dinner. If she has good luck, she will bring us an elephant, or a brace of rhinoceri, or perhaps a few dozen people to stay our hunger. Oh, are you hungry? Inquired Dorothy, drawing back. Very, said the dragonette, snapping its jaws. And do you eat people? To be sure, when we can get them. But they've been very scarce for a few years, and we usually have to be content with elephants or buffaloes, answered the creature in a regretful tone. How old are you? Inquired Zeb, who stared at the yellow eyes as if fascinated. Quite young, I grieve to say, and all of my brothers and sisters that you see here are practically my own age. If I remember rightly, we were 66 years old the day before yesterday. But that isn't young, cried Dorothy in amazement. No, drawled the dragonette. It seems to me very babyish. How old is your mother? Asked the girl. Mother's about 2,000 years old, but she carelessly lost track of her age a few centuries ago and skipped several hundreds. She's a little fussy, you know, and afraid of growing old, being a widow and still in her prime. I think she would be, agreed Dorothy. Then after a moment's thought, she asked, Are we friends or enemies? I mean, will you be good to us, or do you intend to eat us? As for that, we dragonettes would love to eat you, my child. But
Unfortunately, Mother has tied all our tails around the rocks at the back of our individual caves, so that we cannot crawl out to get you. If you choose to come nearer, we will make a mouthful of you in a wink. But unless you do, you will remain quite safe."
There was a regretful accent in the creature's voice, and at the words, all the other dragonettes sighed dismally.
Dorothy felt relieved. Presently she asked,
"Why did your mother tie your tails?"
"Oh, she is sometimes gone for several weeks on her hunting trips, and if we were not tied, we would crawl all over the mountain and fight with each other and get into a lot of mischief. Mother usually knows what she is about, but she made a mistake this time, for you are sure to escape us unless you come too near, and you probably won't do that."
"No, indeed," said the little girl. "We don't wish to be eaten by such awful beasts."
"Permit me to say," returned the dragonette, "that you are rather impolite to call us names, knowing that we cannot resent your insults. We consider ourselves very beautiful in appearance, for Mother has told us so, and she knows. And we are of an excellent family and have a pedigree that I challenge any humans to equal, as it extends back about 20,000 years to the time of the famous green dragon of Atlantis, who lived in a time when humans had not yet been created. Can you match that pedigree, little girl?"
"Well," said Dorothy, "I was born on a farm in Kansas, and I guess that's being just as respectable and haughty as living in a cave with your tail tied to a rock. If it isn't, I'll have to stand it, and that's all."
"Tastes differ," murmured the dragonette, slowly drooping its scaly eyelids over its yellow eyes until they looked like half-moons. Being reassured by the fact that the creatures could not crawl out of their rock pockets, the children and the wizard now took time to examine them more closely. The heads of the dragonettes were as big as barrels, and covered with hard greenish scales that glittered brightly under the light of the lanterns. Their front legs, which grew just back of the heads, were also strong and big, but their bodies were smaller around than their heads, and dwindled away in a long line until their tails were slim as a shoestring. Dorothy thought if it had taken them 66 years to grow to this size, that it would be fully 100 years more before they could hope to call themselves dragons, and that seemed like a good while to wait to grow up. "It occurs to me," said the wizard, "that we ought to get out of this place before the mother dragon comes back."
"Don't hurry," called one of the dragonettes. "Mother will be glad to meet you, I'm sure."
"You may be right," replied the wizard, "but we're a little particular about associating with strangers. Will you kindly tell us which way your mother went to get on top of the earth?"
"That is not a fair question to ask us," declared another dragonette, "for if we told you truly, you might escape us altogether.
And if we told you an untruth, we would be naughty and deserve to be punished."
"Then," decided Dorothy, "we must find our way out the best we can." They circled all around the cavern, keeping a good distance away from the blinking yellow eyes of the dragonettes, and presently discovered that there were 2 paths leading from the wall opposite to the place where they had entered. They selected one of these at venture and hurried along it as fast as they could go, for they had no idea when the mother dragon would be back, and were very anxious not to make her acquaintance. Chapter 14. Ozma uses the magic belt. For a considerable distance, the way led straight upward in a gentle incline, and the wanderers made such good progress that they grew hopeful and eager, thinking they might see sunshine at any minute. But at length they came unexpectedly upon a huge rock that shut off the passage and blocked them from proceeding a single step farther. This rock was separate from the rest of the mountain and was in motion, turning slowly around and around as if upon a pivot. When first they came to it, there was a solid wall before them, but presently it revolved until there was exposed a wide, smooth path across it to the other side. This appeared so unexpectedly that they were unprepared to take advantage of it at first, and allowed the rocky wall to swing around again before they had decided to pass over. But they knew now that there was a means of escape, and so waited patiently until the path appeared for the second time. The children and the wizard rushed across the moving rock and sprang into the passage beyond, landing safely, though a little out of breath. Jim the cab horse came last, and the rocky wall had almost caught him, for just as he leaped to the floor of the further passage, the wall swung across it, and a loose stone that the buggy wheels knocked against fell into the narrow crack, where the rock turned and became wedged there. They heard a crunching, grinding sound, a loud snap, and the turntable came to a stop, with its broadest surface shutting off the path from which they had come. "Never mind," said Zeb. "We don't want to get back anyhow." "I'm not so sure of that," returned Dorothy. "The mother dragon may come down and catch us here."
"It is possible," agreed the wizard, "if this proves to be the path she usually takes. But I have been examining this tunnel, and I do not see any signs of so large a beast having passed through it."
"Then we're all right," said the girl, "for if the dragon went the other way, she can't possibly get to us now."
"Of course not, my dear. But there is another thing to consider. The mother dragon probably knows the road to the earth's surface, and if she went the other way, then we have come the wrong way," said the wizard thoughtfully.
"Dear me," cried Dorothy. "That would be unlucky, wouldn't it?"
"Very, unless this passage also leads to the top of the earth," said Zeb. "For my part, if we manage to get out of here, I'll be glad it isn't the way the dragon goes."
"So will I," returned Dorothy.
"It's enough to have your pedigree flung in your face by such saucy dragonettes. No one knows what the mother might do."
They now moved on again, creeping slowly up another steep incline. The lanterns were beginning to grow dim, and the wizard poured the remaining oil from one into the other, so that the one light would last longer. But their journey was almost over, for in a short time they reached a small cave from which there was no further outlet. They did not realize their ill fortune at first, for their hearts were gladdened by the sight of a ray of sunshine coming through a small crack in the roof of the cave far overhead. That meant that their world, the real world, was not very far away, and that the succession of perilous adventures they had encountered had at last brought them near the earth's surface, which meant home to them. But when the adventurers looked more carefully around them, they discovered that they were in a strong prison from which there was no hope of escape. "But we're almost on Earth again," cried Dorothy, "for there is the sun, the most beautiful sun that shines," and she pointed eagerly at the crack in the distant roof. "Almost on Earth isn't being there," said the kitten in a discontented tone. "It wouldn't be possible for even me to get up to that crack, or through it if I got there."
"It appears that the path ends here," announced the wizard gloomily. "And there's no way to go back," added Zeb with a low whistle of perplexity. I'm sure it would come to this in the end, remarked the old cab horse. Folks don't fall into the middle of the earth and get back again to tell their adventures. Not in real life. And the whole thing has been unnatural because the cat and I are both able to talk your language and to understand the words you say.
And so can the 9 tiny piglets, added Eureka. Don't forget them, for I may have to eat them after all. I've heard animals talk before, said Dorothy, and no harm came of it.
Were you ever before shut up in a cave far under the earth, with no way of getting out? Inquired the horse seriously.
No, answered Dorothy, but don't you lose heart, Jim, for I'm sure this isn't the end of our story by any means. The reference to the piglets reminded the wizard that his pets had not enjoyed much exercise lately, and must be tired of their prison in his pocket. So he lay down upon the floor of the cave, brought the piglets out one by one, and allowed them to run around as much as they pleased.
My dears, he said to them, I'm afraid I've got you into a lot of trouble, and that you'll never again be able to leave this gloomy cave.
What's wrong? Asked a piglet. We've been in the dark quite a while, and you may as well explain what has happened.
The wizard told them of the misfortune that had overtaken the wanderers.
Well, said another piglet, you are a wizard, are you not?
I am, replied the little man.
Oh, then you can do a few whizzes and get us out of this hole, declared the tiny one with much confidence.
I could if I happened to be a real wizard, returned the master sadly. But I'm not, my piggies. I'm a humbug wizard.
Nonsense,
cried several of the piglets together.
You can ask Dorothy, said the little man in an injured tone.
It's true enough, returned the girl earnestly. Our friend Oz is merely a humbug wizard, for he once proved it to me. He can do several very wonderful things, if he knows how. But he can't whiz a single thing if he hasn't the tools and machinery to work with.
Thank you, my dear, for doing me justice, responded the wizard gratefully. To be accused of being a real wizard, when I'm not, is a slander I will not tamely submit to. But I am one of the greatest humbug wizards that ever lived, and you will realize this when we have all starved together and our bones are scattered over the floor of this lonely cave.
I don't believe we'll realize anything when it comes to that, remarked Dorothy, who had been deep in thought. But I'm not going to scatter my bones just yet because I need them, and you probably need yours too.
We are helpless to escape, sighed the wizard.
We may be helpless, answered Dorothy, smiling at him, but there are others who can do more than we can. Cheer up, friends. I'm sure Ozma will help us.
Ozma? Exclaimed the wizard. Who is Ozma?
The girl that rules the marvelous land of Oz, was the reply. She's a friend of mine, for I met her in the land of Ev not long ago, and went to Oz with her.
For the second time? Asked the wizard with great interest.
Yes. The first time I went to Oz, I found you there, ruling the Emerald City. After you went up in a balloon and escaped us, I got back to Kansas by means of a pair of magical silver shoes.
I remember those shoes, said the little man, nodding. They once belonged to the Wicked Witch. Have you them here with you?
No, I lost them somewhere in the air, explained the child. But the second time I went to the land of Oz, I owned the Gnome King's magic belt, which is much more powerful than the silver shoes.
Where is that magic belt? Inquires the wizard, who had listened with great interest.
Ozma has it, for its powers won't work in a common, ordinary country like the United States. Anyone in a fairy country like the land of Oz can do anything with it, so I left it with my friend the Princess Ozma, who used it to wish me in Australia with Uncle Henry.
And were you? Asked Zeb, astonished at what he heard.
Of course, in just a jiffy. And Ozma has an enchanted picture hanging in her room that shows her the exact scene where any of her friends may be, at any time she chooses. All she has to do is to say, "I wonder what so-and-so is doing," and at once the picture shows where her friend is and what the friend is doing. That's real magic, Mr. Wizard, isn't it? Well, every day at 4 o'clock, Ozma has promised to look at me in that picture, and if I am in need of help, I am to make her a certain sign, and she'll put on the Gnome King's magic belt and wish me to be with her in Oz.
Do you mean that Princess Ozma will see this cave in her enchanted picture, and see all of us here and what we're doing?" demanded Zeb.
Of course, when it is 4 o'clock, she replied with a laugh at his startled expression.
"And when you make a sign, she will bring you to her in the land of Oz?" continues the boy.
That's it, exactly, by means of the magic belt.
"Then," said the wizard, "you will be saved, little Dorothy, and I am very glad of it. The rest of us will die much more cheerfully when we know you have escaped our sad fate."
I won't die cheerfully, protested the kitten. There's nothing cheerful about dying that I could ever see, although they say a cat has 9 lives, and so must die 9 times.
"Have you ever died yet?" inquired the boy.
No, and I'm not anxious to begin, said ʔɪṛika. Don't worry, dear, Dorothy exclaimed. I'll hold you in my arms and take you with me. Take us too, cried the 9 tiny piglets all in one breath. Perhaps I can, answered Dorothy. I'll try.
Couldn't you manage to hold me in your arms? Asked the cab horse.
Dorothy laughed. I'll do better than that, she promised, for I can easily save you all once I am myself in the land of Oz. How? They asked. By using the magic belt. All I need to do is to wish you with me, and there you'll be, safe in the royal palace. Good, cried Zeb.
I built that palace, and the Emerald City too, remarked the wizard in a thoughtful tone. And I'd like to see them again, for I was very happy among the Munchkins and Winkies and Quadlings and Gillikins.
Who are they? Asked the boy.
The 4 nations that inhabit the land of Oz, was the reply. I wonder if they would treat me nicely if I went there again.
Of course they would, declared Dorothy. They are still proud of their former wizard and often speak of you kindly.
Do you happen to know whatever became of the Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow? He inquired.
They live in Oz yet, said the girl, and are very important people.
And the Cowardly Lion?
Oh, he lives there too, with his friend the Hungry Tiger, and Belinda is there because she liked the place better than Kansas and wouldn't go with me to Australia.
I'm afraid I don't know the Hungry Tiger and Belinda, said the wizard, shaking his head. Is Belinda a girl?
No, she's a yellow hen and a great friend of mine. You're sure to like Belinda when you know her, asserted Dorothy.
Your friends sound like a menagerie, remarked Zeb uneasily. Couldn't you wish me in some safer place than Oz?
Don't worry, replied the girl. You'll just love the folks in Oz when you get acquainted. What time is it, Mr. Wizard? The little man looked at his watch, the big silver one that he carried in his vest pocket.
3:30, he said.
Then we must wait for half an hour, she continued, but it won't take long after that to carry us all to the Emerald City. They sat silently, thinking for a time. Then Jim suddenly asked,
Are there any horses in Oz?
Only one, replied Dorothy, and he's a sawhorse.
A what?
A sawhorse. Princess Ozma once brought him to life with the witch powder when she was a boy.
Was Ozma once a boy? Asked Zeb wonderingly.
Yes, a wicked witch enchanted her so she could not rule her kingdom, but she's a girl now, and the sweetest, loveliest girl in all the world.
A sawhorse is a thing they saw boards on, remarked Jim with a sniff.
It is when it's not alive, acknowledged the girl, but this sawhorse can trot as fast as you can, Jim, and he's very wise too.
Pah! I'll race the miserable wooden donkey any day in the week, cried the cab horse.
Dorothy did not reply to that. She felt that Jim would know more about the sawhorse later on. The time dragged wearily enough to the eager watchers, but finally the wizard announced that 4 o'clock had arrived, and Dorothy caught up the kitten and began to make the signal that had been agreed upon to the faraway, invisible Ozma.
Nothing seems to happen, said Zeb doubtfully.
Oh, we must give Ozma a time to put on the magic belt, replied the girl. She had scarcely spoken the words, then she suddenly disappeared from the cave, and with her went the kitten. There had been no sound of any kind and no warning. One moment Dorothy sat beside them with the kitten in her lap, and a moment later the horse, the piglets, the wizard and the boy were all that remained in the underground prison.
I believe we will soon follow her, announced the wizard in a tone of great relief, for I know something about the magic of the fairyland that is called the Land of Oz. Let us be ready, for we may be sent for at any minute.
He put the piglets safely away in his pocket again, and then he and Zeb got into the buggy and sat expectantly upon the seat.
Will it hurt? Asked the boy, in a voice that trembled a little. Not at all, replied the wizard. It will all happen as quick as a wink. And that was the way it did happen.
The cab horse gave a nervous start, and Zeb began to rub his eyes to make sure he was not asleep. For they were in the streets of a beautiful emerald green city, bathed in a grateful green light that was especially pleasing to their eyes, and surrounded by merry-faced people in gorgeous green and gold costumes of many extraordinary designs. Before them were the jewel-studded gates of a magnificent palace, and now the gates opened slowly, as if inviting them to enter the courtyard where splendid flowers were blooming and pretty fountains shot their silvery sprays into the air. Zeb shook the reins to rouse the cab horse from his stupor of amazement, for the people were beginning to gather around and stare at the strangers.
Gid-yap,
cried the boy, and at the word Jim slowly trotted into the courtyard and drew the buggy along the jeweled driveway to the great entrance of the royal palace. Chapter 15. Old friends are reunited. Many servants dressed in handsome uniforms stood ready to welcome the new arrivals, and when the wizard got out of the buggy, a pretty girl in a green gown cried out in surprise, "Why, it's Oz, the wonderful wizard, come back again!" The little man looked at her closely, and then took both the maiden's hands in his and shook them cordially.
"On my word," he exclaimed, "it's little Delia Jam. as pert and pretty as ever.
Why not, Mr. Wizard? Asked Jellia, bowing low. But I'm afraid you cannot rule the Emerald City as you used to, because we now have a beautiful princess whom everyone loves dearly.
And the people will not willingly part with her, added a tall soldier in a captain general's uniform.
The wizard turned to look at him.
Did you not wear green whiskers at one time? He asked. Yes, said the soldier, but I shaved them off long ago, and since then I have risen from a private to be the chief general of the royal armies.
That's nice, said the little man, but I assure you, my good people, that I do not wish to rule the Emerald City, he added earnestly.
In that case, you are very welcome, cried all the servants, and it pleased the wizard to note the respect with which the royal retainers bowed before him. His fame had not been forgotten in the land of Oz by any means.
Where's Dorothy?
Inquired Zeb anxiously as he left the buggy and stood beside his friend, the little wizard. She is with the Princess Ozma in the private rooms of the palace, replied Jellia Jam. But she has ordered me to make you welcome and to show you to your apartments. The boy looked around him with wondering eyes. Such magnificence and wealth as was displayed in this palace was more than he had ever dreamed of, and he could scarcely believe that all the gorgeous glitter was real and not tinsel.
What's to become of me? Asked the horse uneasily.
He had been considerable of life in the cities in his younger days, and knew that this regal palace was no place for him. It perplexed even Jellia Jam for a time to know what to do with the animal. The Green Maiden was much astonished at the sight of so unusual a creature, for horses were unknown in this land. But those who lived in the Emerald City were apt to be astonished by queer sights. So after inspecting the cab horse and noting the mild look in his big eyes, the girl decided not to be afraid of him.
There are no stables here, said the wizard, unless some have been built since I went away.
We have never needed them before, answered Jellia, for the sawhorse lives in a room of the palace, being much smaller and more natural in appearance than this great beast you have brought with you.
Do you mean that I'm a freak? Asked Jim angrily.
Oh no, she hastened to say. There may be many more like you in the place you come from, but in Oz, any horse but a sawhorse is unusual. This mollified Jim a little, and after some thought, the Green Maiden decided to give the cab horse a room in the palace, such a big building having many rooms that were seldom in use. So Zeb unharnessed Jim, and several of the servants then led the horse around to the rear, where they selected a nice large apartment that he could have all to himself. Then Jellia said to the wizard, Your own room, which was back of the great throne room, has been vacant ever since you left us. Would you like it again?
Yes, indeed, returned the little man. It will seem like being at home again, for I lived in that room for many, many years.
He knew the way to it, and a servant followed him carrying his satchel. Zeb was also escorted to a room so grand and beautiful that he almost feared to sit in the chairs or lie upon the bed, lest he might dim their splendor. In the closets, he discovered many fancy costumes of rich velvets and brocades, and one of the attendants told him to dress himself in any of the clothes that pleased him, and to be prepared to dine with the princess and Dorothy in an hour's time. Opening from the chamber was a fine bathroom having a marble tub with perfumed water, so the boy, still dazed by the novelty of his surroundings, indulged in a good bath and then selected a maroon velvet costume with silver buttons, to replace his own soiled and much worn clothing. There were silk stockings and soft leather slippers with diamond buckles to accompany his new costume, and when he was fully dressed, Zeb looked much more dignified and imposing than ever before in his life. He was all ready when an attendant came to escort him to the presence of the princess. He followed bashfully and was ushered into a room more dainty and attractive than it was splendid. Here he found Dorothy, seated beside a young girl so marvelously beautiful that the boy stopped suddenly with a gasp of admiration. But Dorothy sprang up and ran to seize her friend's hand, drawing him impulsively towards the lovely princess, who smiled most graciously upon her guest. Then the wizard entered, and his presence relieved the boy's embarrassment. The little man was clothed in black velvet, with many sparkling emerald ornaments decorating his breast, but his bald head and wrinkled features made him appear more amusing than impressive. Ozma had been quite curious to meet the famous man who had built the Emerald City and united the Munchkins, Gillikins, Quadlings, and Winkies into one people. So when they were all four seated at the dinner table, the princess said, "Please tell me, Mr. Wizard, whether you called yourself Oz after this great country, or whether you believe my country is called Oz after you. It is a matter that I have long wished to inquire about, because you are of a strange race, and my own name is Ozma. No one, I am sure, is better able to explain this mystery than you."
"That is true," answered the little wizard. "Therefore, it will give me pleasure to explain my connection with your country. In the first place, I must tell you that I was born in Omaha, and my father, who was a politician, named me Oscar Zoroaster Frederick Isaac Norman Henkel Emmanuel Ambrose Diggs, Diggs being the last name because he could think of no more to go before it. Taken all together, it was a dreadfully long name to weigh down a poor, innocent child, and one of the hardest lessons I ever learned was to remember my own name. When I grew up, I just called myself O.C., because the other initials were P-I-N-H-E-A-D, and that spelled pinhead, which was a reflection on my intelligence.
"Surely no one could blame you for cutting your name short," said Ozma sympathetically. "But didn't you cut it almost too short?"
"Perhaps so," replied the wizard. "When I was a young man, I ran away from home and joined a circus. I used to call myself a wizard and do tricks of ventriloquism."
"What does that mean?" asked the princess.
"Throwing my voice into any object I pleased, to make it appear that the object was speaking instead of me. Also, I began to make balloon ascensions. On my balloon, and on all the other articles I used in the circus, I painted the two initials O.Z. to show that those things belonged to me. One day, my balloon ran away with me and brought me across the deserts to this beautiful country. When the people saw me come down from the sky, they naturally thought me some superior creature and bowed down before me. I told them I was a wizard and showed them some easy tricks that amazed them, and when they saw the initials painted on the balloon, they called me Oz."
"Now I begin to understand," said the princess, smiling.
"At that time," continued the wizard, busily eating his soup while talking, "there were 4 separate countries in this land, each one of the 4 being ruled by a witch. But the people thought my power was greater than that of the witches, and perhaps the witches thought so too, for they never dared to oppose me. I ordered the Emerald City to be built just where the 4 countries cornered together, and when it was completed, I announced myself the ruler of the land of Oz, which included all the 4 countries of the Munchkins, the Gillikins, the Winkies and the Quadlings. Over this land I ruled in peace for many years, until I grew old and longed to see my native city once again. So, when Dorothy was first blown to this place by a cyclone, I arranged to go away with her in a balloon. But the balloon escaped too soon and carried me back alone. After many adventures, I reached Omaha, only to find that all my old friends were dead or had moved away. So, having nothing else to do, I joined the circus again and made my balloon ascensions until the earthquake caught me.
That is quite a history, said Ozma, but there is a little more history about the land of Oz that you do not seem to understand. Perhaps for the reason that no one ever told it to you. Many years before you came here, this land was united under one ruler, as it is now, and the ruler's name was always Oz, which means in our language, great and good. Or, if the ruler happened to be a woman, her name was always Ozma. But, once upon a time, 4 witches leagued together to depose the king and rule the 4 parts of the kingdom themselves. So when the ruler, my grandfather, was hunting one day, one wicked witch named Mombi stole him and carried him away, keeping him a close prisoner. Then the witches divided up the kingdom and ruled the 4 parts of it until you came here. That was why the people were so glad to see you, and why they thought from your initials that you were their rightful ruler.
But at that time, said the wizard thoughtfully, there were 2 good witches and 2 wicked witches ruling in the land.
Yes, replied Ozma, because a good witch had conquered Mombi in the north and Glinda the Good had conquered the evil witch in the south. But Mombi was still my grandfather's jailer, and afterward my father's jailer. When I was born, she transformed me into a boy, hoping that no one would ever recognize me and know that I was the rightful princess of the land of Oz. But I escaped from her, and am now the ruler of my people.
I am very glad of that, said the wizard, and hope you will consider me one of your most faithful and devoted subjects.
We owe a great deal to the wonderful wizard, continued the princess, for it was you who built this splendid emerald city.
Your people built it, he answered. I only bossed the job, as we say in Omaha.
But you ruled it wisely and well for many years, said she, and made the people proud of your magical art. So, as you are now too old to wander abroad and work in a circus, I offer you a home here as long as you live. You shall be the official wizard of my kingdom and be treated with every respect and consideration.
I accept your kind offer with gratitude, gracious princess, the little man said in a soft voice,
and they could all see that teardrops were standing in his keen old eyes. It meant a good deal to him to secure a home like this. He's only a humbug wizard, though, said Dorothy, smiling at him. And that is the safest kind of wizard to have, replied Ozma promptly.
Oz can do some good tricks, humbug or no humbug, announced Zeb, who was now feeling more at ease.
He shall amuse us with his tricks tomorrow, said the princess. I have sent messengers to summon all of Dorothy's old friends to meet her and give her welcome, and they ought to arrive very soon now. Indeed, the dinner was no sooner finished than in rushed the Scarecrow to hug Dorothy in his padded arms and tell her how glad he was to see her again. The wizard was also most heartily welcomed by the straw man, who was an important personage in the land of Oz.
"How are your brains?" inquired the little humbug as he grasped the soft, stuffed hands of his old friend. "Working finely," answered the Scarecrow. "I'm very certain, Oz, that you gave me the best brains in the world, for I can think with them day and night when all other brains are fast asleep." "How long did you rule the Emerald City after I left here?" was the next question. "Quite a while, until I was conquered by a girl named General Ginger. But Ozma soon conquered her with the help of Glinda the Good, and after that I went to live with ʔɪᴏᴏᴏ, the Tin Woodman."
Just then a loud cackling was heard outside, and when a servant threw open the door with a low bow, a yellow hen strutted in. Dorothy sprang forward and caught the fluffy fowl in her arms, uttering at the same time a glad cry. "Oh, Belinda," she said, "how fat and sleek you've grown."
"Why shouldn't I?" asked the hen in a sharp, clear voice. "I live on the fat of the land, don't I, Ozma?"
"You have everything you wish for," said the princess. Around Belinda's neck was a string of beautiful pearls, and on her legs were bracelets of emeralds. She nestled herself comfortably in Dorothy's lap, until the kitten gave a snarl of jealous anger and leaped up with a sharp claw fiercely bared to strike Belinda a blow. But the little girl gave the angry kitten such a severe cuff that it jumped down again without daring to scratch. "How horrid of you, Eureka!" cried Dorothy. "Is that the way to treat my friends?"
"You have queer friends, seems to me," replied the kitten in a surly tone. "Seems to me the same way," said Belinda scornfully, "if that beastly cat is one of them."
"Look here," said Dorothy sternly. "I won't have any quarrelling in the land of Oz, I can tell you. Everybody lives in peace here and loves everybody else. And unless you two, Belinda and Eureka, make up and be friends, I'll take my magic belt and wish you both home again immediately. So, there." They were both much frightened at the threat, and promised meekly to be good. But it was never noticed that they became very warm friends for all of that. And now the Tin Woodman arrived, his body most beautifully nickel-plated so that it shone splendidly in the brilliant light of the room. The Tin Woodman loved Dorothy most tenderly, and welcomed with joy the return of the little old wizard. "Sir," said he to the latter, "I never can thank you enough for the excellent heart you once gave me. It has made me many friends, I assure you, and it beats as kindly and lovingly today as it ever did."
"I'm glad to hear that," said the wizard. "I was afraid it would get mouldy in that tin body of yours." "Not at all," returned ʔɪᴏᴏᴏ. "It keeps finely, being preserved in my airtight chest."
Zeb was a little shy when first introduced to these queer people, but they were so friendly and sincere that he soon grew to admire them very much, even finding some good qualities in the yellow hen. But he became nervous again when the next visitor was announced. "This," said Princess Ozma, "is my friend Mr. ʔɪᴏᴏᴏ, T.E., who assisted me one time when I was in great distress, and is now the Dean of the Royal College of Athletic Science."
"Ah," said the wizard, "I'm pleased to meet so distinguished a personage." "H.M.," said the Wogglebug pompously, "means highly magnified, and T.E. means thoroughly educated. I am in reality a very big bug, and doubtless the most intelligent being in all this broad domain." "How well you disguise it," said the wizard, "but I don't doubt your word in the least."
"Nobody doubts it, sir," replied the Wogglebug, and drawing a book from its pocket, the strange insect turned its back on the company and sat down in a corner to read. Nobody minded this rudeness, which might have seemed more impolite in one less thoroughly educated, so they straightway forgot him and joined in a merry conversation that kept them well amused until bedtime arrived.